As Iranians go to the polls for the first time since the disputed presidential election in 2009, we ask, what does the parliamentary election mean for Iran? Has anything changed since the political unrest 3 years ago? And just how much power does the Iranian parliament hold? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Nazenin Ansari. Friday's parliamentary election in Iran is the first national election since the disputed presidential poll of 2009, when mass protests rocked the country. Well, this election is being seen as a contest between Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei and President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, whose once close relationship has deteriorated in recent years. But in the absence of reformist candidates and with members of the opposition calling for a boycott of the elections, Iran's ruling conservative faction has the election all to itself. From Tehran, Zaina Khudar reports.
Election campaigning in Iran, but there seems to be little enthusiasm, especially in the capital where many don't know much about the candidates. And the candidates who some do relate to are not contesting the parliamentary vote. The opposition's leadership is under house arrest, and reformists have been banned from running.
I won't vote because in the last election I didn't get my rights, and those who did protest the result were faced with batons or imprisonment.
Others, however, are keen to give their vote to a leadership they don't question.
There is no need for not participating because, we are a strong follower of my leader, Mr. Khamenei.
It is almost as if the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is running for election. His posters are in almost every street corner, appealing to the public to vote, calling it a religious duty. The clerical leadership may be the undisputed leaders in Iran, but they're facing opposition. And this time it's not from the reformists, but opposition from within their own ranks, the conservatives. And so people like Majid will have to choose from candidates representing the ruling establishment, the very people many blame for their daily hardships. But Majid simply can't make up his mind on whether he will cast his ballot.
Yes.
There is division here among the people and the leadership, which is not only vying for power but legitimacy.
It is actually a struggle, rivalry, political inside fighting, if you like, between the conservatives. You could split the conservatives into two camps. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, heading the more traditional conservative, and on the one hand, and then you have against him, you have Ahmadinejad and basically his support.
For Ahmadinejad and his supporters, this is a fight for their political survival. For the clerical leadership, this is an election about legitimizing its continued authority while facing internal and external pressures, making this more a referendum than an election. Zaina Khudar for Inside Story.
So, Iran is going to the polls to elect 290 members of its parliament, known as the Majlis. Friday's vote comes at an uncertain time for the country. It's facing greater sanctions from the West, threat of attack from Israel, and a growing rift within the government itself. Well, this is the first time, as we're saying, Iranians go back to the polls since the 2009 presidential election. Registration began on December the 27th, and more than 5,000 candidates signed up at the time. But more than a third were disqualified. Many were from the reformist movement, including several sitting MPs, and that faction is now boycotting the election. Well, candidates had just 1 week to campaign, and voting on Friday will take place in 47,000 polling booths in more than 200 areas in the country. So what does this election mean for Tehran? And who are the main power brokers? And just how powerful is the Iranian parliament? Let's put this to all our guests. From Tehran, we're joined by Kian Mokhtari. He's a freelance columnist. Kian is also a researcher for Iran's Foreign Ministry Research Institute and an advisor to the Office of Protocol in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In London, Nazenin Ansari, she's a diplomatic correspondent for Kayhan weekly newspaper. Nazenin is also the former president of the Foreign Press Association. Also joining us from London is Potkin Azarmehr, a blogger and political activist. Potkin is also a contributor for publications such as The Guardian and The Wall Street Journal. Thank you, all of you, for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Kian in Tehran, if I can come to you first, how important is this parliamentary election for Iran at this time?
Well, parliamentary elections are leading elections in Iran. Although I can't really talk in this sensationalist terms about this, make or break, house arrest reformists, etc. I think you have to come and live in Iran rather than live in the West and give outside views about the country. It's funny because in the West, if you have a robust discussion between various political factions, they call that a progressive democracy. If here we have the Conservative Front not agreeing on their candidates who they want to field, they call it, oh dear, there are divisions forming and the country is falling to bits. As a matter of fact, a quick look at the West shows that the story may be the other way around, with the US announcing today that the sanctions are going nowhere, and as a matter of fact there isn't enough oil to fill the markets, and India, China and Japan, strangely, ignoring the latest round of bravado and bigging it up sanctions from Washington, which generally comes from the APAC. You talked about the threat from Israel. Israel knows what's coming to it if it lifts a finger against Iran.
Right, okay,
so
but I do want to
calm down and sit down and listen to some sense.
Okay, I do want to focus, though, however, on the parliamentary elections for the time being. But let me get the thoughts of Potkin in London. In your opinion, gauge these elections for me. How important are they?
Well, I think as your correspondent correctly reported, there is very lack of enthusiasm amongst the population for these elections. We're now in a situation 33 years after the 1979 revolution, where the people took to the street to have a democratic system, to be able to elect their representatives, to a situation where not only the regime is selecting their candidates for them, but even in the elections of the candidates that they've selected, they cheat. And it's because of what happened in the 2009 presidential elections, where people don't even believe that their votes will be counted, even though they're just only for the people that the regime have selected. So for that reason, if you were in a situation where you knew that your vote doesn't count, where you knew your day-to-day life is not going to change, whatever happens, whoever goes to the parliament, obviously you wouldn't be that enthusiastic. And that's why your correspondent has correctly reported that there is very lack of enthusiasm amongst the population for these elections. The fact is that year after year, the life standard of Iranian people is dropping, and the people are struggling harder, whereas our people, with all the natural resources that we have, with all the human resources that we have, should have been one of the most prosperous people in the region.
Nazanin, your thoughts, please, on the parliamentary elections, and also just outline for us what powers Parliament actually holds in Iran.
Regarding the parliamentary elections, basically, as Potkin said, in Iran we have not had elections, we have had selections. You have to be selected to run, and also, as we saw in 2009, the last elections, the voting patterns are not as transparent as one would like it to be. Potkin can also explain this to you. There were instances, for example, when the Interior Ministry posted number of votes for special candidates, and it exceeded the number of residents in those provinces. In some cases, for example, a candidate would receive 400% of the vote. But obviously, the times have changed. Iran at the moment, the regime in Tehran is very adept at using computer technology networks. They have created a cyber army that has been able to monitor websites, monitor access to internet in cyber cafes. They have brought over 56 laws really trying to control the citizens, Iranian citizens' access to the internet, and also freedom of expression. So this is the environment and the atmosphere that these so-called elections are taking place. As far as the parliament itself, it is very interesting because, I mean, if you look at the structure of the Islamic Republic, the organizational structure, at the end of the day, the Ayatollah, the Supreme Ayatollah Khamenei, he holds the veto power. So in a way, it is a rule by divine right by one man. Unfortunately for him, he's not a very popular man these days because not only have his former reformist allies abandoned or been forced to flee the country, but also within his own constituents. We have, for example, the principalists, the most conservative of them, who are the supporters of Mr. Ahmadinejad, taking issue against him. And what we do here, obviously, I am not allowed, yes, I am allowed to go back to Iran, but whether I will be allowed to come out or whether, you know, where I'll be able to stay in a hotel or in Evin, that's one of the reasons a lot of us journalists cannot have access to Iran.
All right.
And
Kian,
yes.
Kian, Nazenin, they're speaking about a selection rather than an election. What do you make of that? And why are the reformists boycotting these parliamentary elections?
Well, Ms. Ansari lives in a country that feeds off the genocide of Australian Aborigines and Canadian natives, and has a taste of democracy, has the ghoul to come us and tell us what democracy is.
But the fact is, the reformists are boycotting the elections. Tell me why.
No, where did you hear that? The reformists have actually fielded candidates, and their candidates are running tomorrow.
There is a report as well.
Just because
Kian, there is a report.
You're not letting me finish again. Would you like me to answer your question?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that there is a report as well that was put out by Amnesty International, and this is a worldwide organization that's put out this report saying that a lot of opposition activists have been jailed leading up to these parliamentary elections.
Really? Well, Amnesty International will better name them then. And also I'd like to tell Mr. Azarmehr that if he's got any evidence that Iranian elections were flawed, he better come out with this evidence or shut his mouth and stop libeling the Iranian elections. We have a healthy democracy here. It is in early stages. Can I just ask you a question? But it is ongoing. Can I ask you a question? But it is ongoing. Right. No, you can't.
Well,
please go ahead. We have to hear.
I'm in the Jazeera studio, so you can't tell me to shut my mouth.
1 second, gentlemen.
We're
just 1 second.
We're not in Iran. You can't tell.
Potkin,
I didn't tell you to
shut
shut your mouth. I said I was not going to take a question from you.
All right, all right. Well, let me just get Potkin's point of view.
Yeah, well, I mean, I heard Kian say that I should shut my mouth. Now, I'm in Al Jazeera studio. I'm not in Iran, where he can tell people that don't agree with him
You're libeling Iranian
democracy.
And if you cared anything for this country, you have no right to libel our elections.
Right. Look, you can accuse Nazenin of living outside Iran. You can accuse me of living outside Iran, and somehow connect this with the massacre of the Aborigines
and you
in
have
Australia.
no idea what it's like living in Iran.
You want to, yeah, well,
but
you
the
can scrape the
democracy you
bottom of the
live
barrel
under
as you like it. But
carries on with its genocide of Aborigines and lectures us about democracy.
Yes, very good. Yeah, me and Nazenin are responsible for the massacre of the Aborigines. Okay, let's move on now. I'm going to say someone like Reza Jalali. Reza Jalali is a war veteran. Reza Jalali is someone who went to war.
Let me just interrupt, gentlemen, because I'd really like to focus on the actual parliamentary elections here. I know there's a wide range of topics that we can talk about, but just, Potkin, let me come back to you, because there's talk of a growing rift. As we said, there's talk... Let me finish my question, please.
Let me just finish what I'm saying.
Let me finish my question, if you don't mind. There's talk of a rift between...
Before you ask your question...
Go ahead.
Before you ask your question, I just want to give an example so the viewers understand what sort of candidates are being disqualified. It's not just like people like me or Nazenin outside Iran or people who took part in the massacre of Aborigines who've been disqualified. Someone like Reza Jalali, he's someone who went to the war front at the age of 13. He's a war veteran. He served many months in the war with Iraq. He defended our country. He's a university lecturer. He's been disqualified 3 times. Why should someone like that be disqualified? When he is someone who fought against Saddam Hussein, someone who was an aggressor against our country, and yet we have someone like George Galloway, who's a friend of Uday Hussein, working for Press TV, working for the Iranian government. How is this justified, Kian? Can you justify this for me?
Well, you better ask George Galloway why he works for us. Perhaps he's disaffected with the fact that they stole his house.
Why are you disqualifying someone who went and fought for the country?
Scandal.
Why are you disqualifying someone who went and fought for the country?
Excuse me, Mr.
But you're employing someone who was friends with our enemy.
1 second. Excuse me, Mr. Azarmehr. 1 second. You better ask the Guardian Council in writing. I don't run the government here.
Right, but the Guardian Council,
is that clear?
The Guardian Council, Nazenin, the Guardian Council is run under who, Nazenin? If you can come in, Nazenin, the Guardian Council is run under who in Iran?
Well, everything is run by the supreme leader. He has the ultimate veto, and at the end of the day, it is everything. All the laws, all the policies have to be okayed by him. And don't forget, let's go back to the 2009 elections again. It wasn't until Mr. Khamenei who came and said that Mr. Ahmadinejad had won that basically the election results were confirmed. So Mr. Khamenei controls, and Mr. Kian in Tehran. I think his posturing and his nervous attitude is reflective of the situation, the political atmosphere in Iran. Unfortunately, there are areas that even Mr. Khamenei's entourage is not really assured of what IRIB, which is the Iranian broadcasting, is putting on the is broadcasting, whether it is part of a conspiracy or not. So this elections, I wouldn't call it a referendum, simply because it is not free, it is not open. Not all people can participate in it.
Right, so it seems to be,
Nazenin, as very decisive.
Okay, it seems to be an election between conservative parties, as we're saying. Just tell us who these parties are that are running for these seats in Parliament.
Well, on one side, as one of the gentlemen in the clip said, you can divide it into 2. You can even divide it more than 2. But for the purposes of simplicity, to be able to understand what is at stake, is that on one side, you have Mr. Ahmadinejad and his like-minded followers, who are, funnily enough, right now, becoming more secular-minded than the others. The other group of principalists that are that include the Larijani brothers, Ali Larijani, or the head of the Majlis, and he is one of the candidates in Qom. And it would be very interesting to follow his the voting, whether he received as much voting as he received in previous elections, as much votes. Then you also have the sister of Mr. Ahmadinejad being one of the candidates. So it is a very big muddle as far as what are the policies, what kind of, whether they want to talk to the West, how do they, for example, follow through with the nuclear negotiations. Obviously, the government of Mr. Ahmadinejad wants to reach an understanding with the West, but it is Mr. Khamenei and the others who would prefer him not to, because if he does, they are afraid that, basically that would be the end of the end of their line of no, that there's a red line and we will not accept stopping the enrichment.
Potkin,
but all in all, what it's...
All right, Nazenin, I apologize
Yes.
for interrupting you. Potkin, I will come to you in just a moment, but Kian, first over to you, because there's been talk, as you know, of a rift between the president and the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Is that basically what this election is coming down to, in your opinion?
Well, according to your rather dramatic guest from Chatham House, it's all doom and gloom, it's all finished, we better pack up and go home.
I'd like your opinion. I'd
No,
like
it
your
isn't
opinion.
about that.
I've heard my guest's opinion. What's your opinion?
Well, what's my opinion? My opinion is, I've told you my opinion. We have it is a budding democracy in Iran. It requires work from patriots, from seculars, from the religious, from everybody who can help this country. And who's willing to take the risk of the in prison
people who've been involved in embezzlements.
To come here and contribute. I'd like to tell Mr. Azarmehr that Britain at the moment is reeling under a £1 trillion embezzlement brought about by its democracy. So you better check around your own neighborhood first, Mr. Azarmehr, before throwing muck at Iran. Iran is not going to be belittled.
But we're not talking about my neighbourhood at the moment. We're talking about Iran. Because you can't answer the questions about Iran, you keep going to other places. We're talking about the Iran elections here. We're not talking about Aborigines. We're not talking about embezzlement in Britain. We're talking about Iran elections.
I'm sorry. Would you like to calm down? If you like to keep shouting at me because you're going to see me as a representative of the government, then we better call this a day now.
All right, well, let's get Potkin's point of view.
I'm seeing you as someone who's not focusing on the issue.
Potkin, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll give you time to respond.
He's been shouting the whole time at me. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Potkin, go ahead and respond to Kian. And also tell me, what's at stake, do you think, if Ahmadinejad loses out on the parliamentary seats? What's at stake for him?
Well, let me just come to you. In 1979, when our parents took to the streets during the 1979 revolution, they wanted to be able to elect their own representative. They didn't think there was going to be a guardian council which is going to qualify or disqualify candidates as they please. The sort of people that they're qualifying are people who've got fake PhDs, fake educational qualifications, people who've taken part in financial embezzlements, and the sort of people that they're disqualifying, and the sort of people who went to the war fronts, who fought for the country, who've been of service to the country. Now, the other significant thing about this election, you mentioned Ahmadinejad. I mean, I can predict you what the election results are going to be. It's going to be mainly Supreme Leader supporters, but maybe about 10% of Ahmadinejad supporters. But the other significant thing about this parliament will be that I'm going to refer to one of Supreme Leader's speeches earlier on, where he mentioned that from now on maybe we could do away with presidential elections as well and have the president being elected by the parliament. Now, I think that might be significant in the nature of the elections this time. So the Supreme Leader has got the Parliament completely taken over by its own supporters, and we may see a change in the Constitution where they do away with the presidential elections as well, because holding the presidential elections is a bit of a headache for them, and the Majlis may even elect the president directly. So, in other words, forget about any sort of election in Iran altogether. It's a complete sham. It's the Majlis is not representative of the people. I mean, just look at the makeup of the Iranian parliament. Look at the number of clerics in the parliament, and look at the number of clerics amongst the population. Look at the number of women in the parliament. Look at the and compare that with the number of women in Iran's population.
Let's look at the number of women in the parliament. Let's look at that.
How many women have you got in the parliament? Let's look at the number of women in the parliament. 50% of Iran's population are women. How many women have you got?
There were 400
Forget the applicants. How many
people have you got in the British parliament?
Look,
why should I forget the applicants? Let's look at the applicants. Iranian women. Excuse me, stop shouting at me.
Okay, hang on a second, gentlemen. Look, it's just a few hours now before the parliamentary elections on Friday. I'd really like to get your thoughts, Kian, because you're sitting in Tehran and the government has really been pushing people to come out for these elections. So do you expect voter turnout to be high there?
Yes, it's never been below 52%. It's been the highest has been 70%. Equivalent elections in the United States have drawn 48% at most and 36%. We do expect a lot of people because we have brought in all sorts of, as one of your guests pointed out earlier, we've brought out all sorts of modern technologies to bear on these elections. The candidates have been able to lobby using their the websites, text messaging, all sorts of new ideas and debates where they've been televised. So I do expect a large number of people, certainly over 50%, to take part. We are a budding democracy. We are working on our democracy, and we are going to succeed with it, regardless of rather uncooked and unbaked ideas and accusations coming from overseas.
All right. Unfortunately,
Iran
I'll have to end it there.
has got a long way to go. Yes, you will have to end it there.
I will have to end it there. It's a 25-minute program. Kian, thank you very much for joining us, though, from Tehran. Kian Mokhtari, Nazenin Ansari, and Potkin Azarmehr from London, thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. And, of course, we welcome our viewers' comments and suggestions anytime. You can email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.